Live from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy, this is WCPC Channel 15 and 107.5 FM WSFD-LP Westfield.
Support for the community programming provided by the Dunkin' Donut Shops of Westfield and the Sardinia family. It's nice to know that even as the world changes, Dunkin' Coffee remains the same at 7 convenient locations throughout Westfield.
Good morning, Westfield. There we are. It is 6 o'clock. You are listening to... Oh, Pete's a little sleepy this morning, so we have...
I was like, uh-oh.
Yeah, what's going on? I'm like, okay, where am I?
I didn't have the cameras adjusted right.
There you go.
Yeah.
It is 6 o'clock. Actually, it's 6:01. You are listening to WSFD 107.5 FM on your dial, and you are watching WCPC Cable Channel 15. My name is Tina Gorman. I am your Wake Up Wednesday host. I am in the studio with the chairman of the board and our chief engineer, Pete Coles. Good morning, Pete.
Good morning.
Pete needs more sleep. Yeah,
well,
Pete needs more sleep.
It's been a crazy week.
Okay, how so?
Because this is school vacation week, obviously, so there's no students here this week. But this is when they cram Western Mass into school vacation week. So now, since Jake McIsaac and his brother have been doing games, and I lost my part-timer, sort of.
Yep.
It's been crazy around here.
Yeah. You know what? And I completely...
The hockey team is doing well.
Yeah, I completely forgot that we're on school vacation. I'm thinking, wow, it's really quiet here. There's nobody around. It's just Pete and me. Well, that's why.
Right.
I just, because we're not on a school vacation in my household and we're not at the senior center, obviously. So, I just forget about these things. But yes, it is very quiet here. No one around, just Pete, myself. We have guests coming in today, so we've got a full show. So I'm excited about that. We
had Western Mass hockey semifinals yesterday.
And how'd they do?
Well, they're at the Olympia, so we couldn't bring the truck because we didn't get permission, one.
Oh, okay.
Because it kept hanging up on Jake.
Okay.
And two, it's just I'm one guy.
Yes,
and
right.
I tape shows all week.
Yes, yeah, exactly.
People don't seem to realize that.
Yeah,
I actually do a full-time job. I don't just sit around all week.
Right, exactly. Yeah.
So today is the Western Mass basketball finals, and since they closed the cage at UMass, Westfield's been hosting them.
Westfield High School?
Because it has the biggest gym in the area that can hold the most spectators and things like that.
Really?
Yes.
Who knew?
So we've been hosting apparently for a couple of years now.
Did not know that.
I didn't know it either. Until the athletic director, hey, you want to cover? We have games at 2, 4, and 6. And I'm like,
Yeah, you want to get me more help?
Well, that was part of it.
Yeah.
Brady's going to step up and do at least a championship game.
Perfect.
After he gets out of his real full-time job at 4 o'clock.
What is Brady doing now full-time?
He has my old job at the technology center. He's the
I didn't know that.
public safety IT guy. Yeah, that's where he left. They poached him. So
I can't say anything about poaching because I now have such a reputation for that people are actually coming to me before the fact saying, we want somebody from such and such a department. Can you help us get that person? That's so I can't say anything about poaching.
Well, yeah, they were having a tough time apparently filling the position.
Yeah,
it's my old job, public safety IT.
Yep.
And communications, and they were having a tough time filling it because it's kind of a unique
It
unicorn
is. It's
position.
a niche. Yeah.
And so they called down, Lenore called down here asking the IT shop if they had anybody. And they're like, we got the perfect person for that. Pete's going to be mad about it, but
Yeah, and you said, no, you don't, no, you don't, no, you don't.
I'm like, I'm not mad about it.
Yeah.
I'm just losing a really good guy that is really enthusiastic and was, filling the gap really well.
So is Brady not, my understanding was that he was going to be heading out to school this semester.
That's deferred right now.
Oh, that's deferred. Okay, all right, okay. Because I was going to say, if he's got a full-time job,
He's now getting real world experience. I told him at minimum finish his degree at Holyoke Community College, which he's going to do.
Yes.
Minimum.
Yes.
And he's on board with that. And he might finish anyways, but he says getting real world experience right now, especially in that field, IT.
Yep.
You can do really well without having a degree.
Yep.
A full degree.
But you know what? I agree with you, Pete.
It changes so rapidly.
It does. But I agree with you, Pete. Get that 2-year. He's on his way to that anyway.
He's so close to that.
Get that.
And that's where I screwed up.
Yeah. Yep. Just get it because that will.
I shouldn't say that. I didn't screw up. I just I kept falling into opportunities here because I had a good reputation.
Yeah.
Which is easier when you have a good reputation than trying to start.
Right.
If I had to go out on my own right now into the job market.
Yeah.
My experience would help me lots, but people would be like, "You don't have a college degree."
And
I'm like, but so
I know. But in some cases, in order to get the door open, that's your starting point.
I know.
Unfortunately, but good for Brady. Well, congratulations to him. I didn't know. I didn't realize that he was working for the city full time.
He got the job before I left on vacation.
Okay, so it's recent.
And I found out from another teacher down here who was coming down to congratulate him, and he hadn't told me yet because he thought I'd be mad. And I'm really happy for him.
Yes.
I'm just like,
Yeah, disappointed, but we get it.
I said, I'm extremely happy for you. Dude, you're going to be making, his salary will be published anyways because all of our salaries are published.
Yeah, right.
But like $60,000 a year as an 18-year-old.
Yeah, hello. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I'm so happy for him.
Yeah. Perfect.
And he's peppering me with questions all the time, which is funny as hell.
Yeah.
Well, you used to have this job. I need to. I don't want to seem like I'm stupid or anything, but I need an answer to a question, and I don't want to ask them.
We've all been there, Pete.
I'm like Brady. That's so Brady.
I know. But we've all been there. We've all been there. I don't want to seem dumb. They hired me and they went out of their way and yada yada. So. All right. Well, okay. Good for Brady. So
and now we have a championship game tomorrow night for hockey, and I have to try to go over to the Olympia to convince them that we have a truck and we really mean business over here.
Yep.
And that we'd like to do the game as a full live production. I don't think they understand that because nobody's come at them that way in decades.
Sure. Well, good luck with that. I think that's a great, I think it's a great offer. So
we'll see
what they do.
Yeah, we'll see.
All right. So that would be very cool.
Yeah.
All right. Well, we have all kinds of stuff going on. Oh, first of all, let me just outline the show today. So Dr. Akinyele Lovelace, our resident primary care physician, will be joining us in a few minutes. And it is Heart Month. It is American Heart Health Month. And so he's going to be talking heart talk, heartbeat. So we'll call this Heartbeat. That's our segment. And then second hour is kind of a continuation of the conversation that we started last week with John Kroll. John, if you recall, works for Hospice of Western and Central Massachusetts. And because of his position, I had him kind of talking more about the business of hospice. So, more about insurance coverage and
how you get started.
Right. Today's guest, Maureen Groden, is actually a hospice nurse. She has been for several years. She's an educator, and now she's an author. She has a book that just came out yesterday, and it's a book about caring for your loved ones. I want to get the exact title of this book. Right. Hold on, I have the thing. It's called When a Loved One is Dying, Conversations about Care, Connection, and Coping. And it's gotten really good reviews from some pretty impressive people. So anyway, Maureen is going to be joining us second hour. She's really going to talk about hospice from a completely different angle, sort of the caregiving angle, the medical aspect, the nursing aspect.
Part of it.
Exactly. So we're going to approach it, that way. I think she's going to be a fabulous guest. So she will be joining me a little after 7 o'clock. I really wanted to give her kind of a whole hour because there's a lot to cover. So that's that's what's happening here. Let me do a few announcements before Dr. Lovelace comes because I've got all these guests coming on. We won't have a lot of time for this later. And next week, I want to make sure I get my Tuesday announcements in because these will be done by the time I come back next week. So Bay State Hearing Aid Service, Jeff Halls will be at the Senior Center next Tuesday. He's always there the last Tuesday of the month, so it'll be February 24th. From 10 a.m. to noon. You do have to call the Senior Center in advance and schedule in an appointment. He is a board-certified hearing instrument sciences specialist. He does accurate hearing screening, in the canal earwax inspection, hearing aid cleaning, and free minor repairs, including tubing replacements. So Jeff will be with us next Tuesday in the morning, and then next Tuesday in the afternoon, Jen Jafune will join us. She is our support group facilitator for the Diabetes Dialogue Support and Education Group. Jen is a licensed nutritionist and registered dietitian. So she will actually be at the Senior Center Tuesday running her monthly group from 1:30 to 2:30. And then she will be with us here on air the next morning, next Wednesday. The topic is going to be the same because this is a big topic. It's a new topic, and there's a lot to talk about. It's the government's new dietary guidelines. So, remember that pyramid that we all grew up with? Well, that's kind of literally turned upside down. So Jenna's going to cover that. And again, her Diabetes Dialogue Support and Education Group. For one thing, folks, it is open to not just those with diabetes. It is open to their family, and anything that she talks about is really relevant to all of us. So anybody is welcome to attend. There are no signups, no advance registration for Jen's group. Just come on over to the Senior Center. They'll be meeting upstairs. I think. I got to figure out where they're meeting upstairs in their regular room. It's my tax room, but I'm going to break it down for a bunch of stuff happening next week. And then starting next Wednesday on February 25th for 10 weeks, we are having our bingo size. It's a game, it's exercise, it's nutritional information, and mostly it's a lot of fun. And that is going to happen on Wednesday afternoons, again, starting next week. From 1 to 2 p.m. after lunch. No advance signups. All are welcome. And then finally, next Thursday, which is February 26th, we will have students from Westfield Technical Academy. They will provide technology support. We are learning, we've known this, but it always comes out, it's glaring during tax season when we're trying to call people back and they don't know how to retrieve their voicemail messages off of their cell phones. They know that we called because a lot of them can see that they missed a call from the Senior Center, but what they do is they immediately call us back and say, somebody from the center called me. Can you tell me who it is and what did they want? Well, no, we can't because we have like 14 employees on 2 separate floors and we have no idea who called you. We left a voicemail, but if you don't know how to retrieve your voicemails, you're not listening. And we'll say that, did you get a voicemail? Well, I'm not sure. Well, check your voicemail. Well, I don't really know how. So that's where the students come in. All right. So schedule an appointment because you bring your own device, whether it's your cell phone, your tablet, your laptop, whatever it is. Bring your device. The students will do one-on-one with you. So they will be there next Thursday from 9 to 11. Again, you do have to sign up in advance. We like to give the students advance notice of the kinds of, problems or questions that you're going to be throwing at them, just so that they can be prepared and you can make the most out of your session. So that's all happening next week. Today's calendar winner, our friends of the Westfield Senior Center beating the Winter Blas gift card calendar. So this is the first time we've ever had this gift on our calendar. It's $35 to the Senior Center wallet. So the Senior Center Wallet is a program that Mike Squindo started when he joined as executive director. And it's where you actually have, it's kind of like your savings account at the Senior Center or your debit account, really, because what it is you can put money into your Senior Center wallet under your name. And then when you come for meals or you come for parties or you want to do a class, if you don't, have the cash or you don't want to pay the cash or write a check, we just take it out of your wallet. So we deduct it out of your wallet. It's really handy to have. I've started using it for my meals, and I pick up meals for my neighbors who are homebound. And so we do a wallet. So it's going to be $35 in your wallet. And today's winner, I'm thrilled to announce, is somebody who comes to the Senior Center all the time. So she'll find this really useful. Irene Makowitz. Irene, by the way, was one of the subjects of the WOW presentation last year on the essence of aging, and she was one of the people that that Bill Hughes took photos of because she's in her 90s. And so anyway, congratulations to Irene Makowitz. I'll be calling you later just in case you're not watching the show this morning. But you now have, well, as soon as our principal clerk gets there this morning, you will have $35 in your senior center wallet. So not a bad deal at all. A reminder, folks, that tax season is going strong at the senior center. We are now at full capacity when it comes to the number of appointments that we have booked each day. So the first couple of days, the first week we started out slower, and now we are up to 32 appointments a day. And I think in March it's 34 appointments a day. So lots of appointments.
Holy cow.
Yeah, exactly. I'm looking for my little.
My tax appointment is today because we have to. We're married now. So we have
Right,
to
exactly. You've got all kinds of changes.
jointly, separate, married. She's got the liability from the house. We have to figure out capital gains, just all kinds of stuff. Next year, I told her it's TurboTax. We're easy next year.
Yeah.
This year we have to pay an account.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there's a plus to knowing when it's just a little bit more than you can handle on your own. And when you've had big changes like that. As a matter of fact,
huge.
Yeah, it is. And
next year's simple.
Yeah. The funny thing is we had a woman last year. She called me this year. She wanted an appointment, and she told me, she said, last year I tried getting an appointment. Well, she said I got an appointment, but when she brought all the documentation down, they told her it was just out of scope because it was just like you, Pete. Too many things had happened. She sold her house, this, that, and the other thing. And they said to her, this year you're out of scope, but next year call us and we should be good to go. So she did. She called and she said, okay, this year all that's done. The house has been sold. I've moved. I'm settled. This is just a regular tax return this year. So all good. Yeah, all good. All right. So where's my Dr. Yakinyele Lovelace? Not here yet.
No. Better text him in the break.
I will. Let me see. Well, let me make sure I didn't get a text from him, like I overslept. No text from him. Okay. He'll be coming in on two wheels. All right. Well, you know what? I can do some more announcements. So let's go back to the taxes for just 1 minute. We still do have some appointments left, folks. So just so that people know, a couple of things. We're booking now out to the very end of March. So I believe we are full up through March 23rd. That's pretty much done now. March 26th is kind of halfway. So we're booking March 26th and then I think like the 30th, something like that. So if you call us and you want an appointment, know that. Because we've had people that have called and it's like, well, I want to get a tax appointment. And when, Carol calls them back to schedule, she says, okay, well, I have an availability on March 26th. I have to wait till the end of March? Well, yes, you do. Or you don't. You can pay someone to do it and probably have it done, this week. But yeah,
you do have choices. We're not the only game in town.
I have said that, but here's the rub, because the voicemails are coming in loud and clear now. It's like, well, Agawam is full, West Springfield is full, Wilbraham is full. I'm not sure about Chicopee yet. I usually get a flood when everybody else fills up. We're not quite there yet, but we're getting there. So yeah, we're soon we will be the only game in town. And soon we will be full. That's the other thing. And I say to people,
you have a finite number of
appointments. We do. We have and I tell people that. And here's the other thing I'm going to tell people. If you have to be a member of the Westfield Senior Center in order to have your taxes done with us. Now, you don't have to be a member when you call to say, I want to have my taxes done. We're going to do your membership over the phone. And generally, I do that. And it's pretty simple, folks. It's, name, address, phone, that kind of thing. But we also need an emergency contact, a name, a phone number.
I see a car coming.
Good. However that person is related to you. So what I do is if we do have someone who's a member, but their membership information isn't up to date. So maybe usually it's something is missing. Either a birth date is missing. And by the way, if a birth date is missing, it automatically plugs in as that you were born 1900. So when I see that your age is 126, I know that we don't have a birth date for you, and we need that. That's statistical stuff for us. I mean, I don't care how old you are, but, we need to say.
Well, it's for grants and things like that.
It's for grants. Like, we serve so many people over the age of 80.
Correct.
We serve so many people, right? Okay. So that's why we need that, folks. We don't sell that information. We don't need it personally, but we need it for statistics. And as Pete said, oftentimes we need it for grants.
They want proof of population.
Right. What are you doing? And the other thing for us that's really important is we have to have an emergency contact on record. So because it is not uncommon, believe it or not, at a senior center to be calling 911 because someone is having some kind of a healthcare crisis. We need to be able to call somebody, and say, gee, we just sent your loved one up to Bay State Noble Hospital. Here's your notification. So here's what I do now. When I get calls on the tax line, now it happens more and more where I look and either the person is not in our database yet, so I got to put them in there. I have to call them and we have to do that. Or they're in there, but we're missing information. Then I call them and I leave them a message and I say, we're missing information. This is the information we're missing. Usually it's a birth date or it's an emergency contact. I'm not sending this routing slip to the scheduler until I get that information. So now the ball is in their court. I will call twice. I will leave 2 messages. And I will say to them, the longer that you put this off, the less, the fewer chances you're going to have to actually get an appointment because they're filling up now. There is going to be a time probably within the next week or so when I'm saying we don't have any appointments left.
That's it.
So,
close.
So some people are wonderful about it. And I say to them, listen, if I just need your birth date, just leave me a voicemail. You don't have to talk to me. Give me your name. Tell me what your date of birth is. Or, again, same with the emergency contact. Give me a name. Is it a friend, a relative? How are they related?
Yep.
And give me a phone number. I delete that as soon as I put it into our database. But then you're all set to go. And then I pass it along to the scheduler. And Carol's really calling within like 48 hours after we get the messages. So we're happy to keep things moving right along. But you have to do, I've always said, you kind of have to do your share.
Speaking of calling, I think it's time to call the doctor.
It is time to call the doctor. You are listening to WSFD. 107.5 FM on your dial, and you are watching WCPC Cable Channel 15. So we are going to call the doctor. This song is by Diamond Temple, our good doctor's father-in-law, and we'll be back.
Got this monkey on my back, got like nipping at my heels, turning on my wheels. What's this pain in my chest? No, I really don't want to gas. Appointment overdue. See, Joy Jane Island when I woke up yesterday, and I can't remember if I took my meds today. It's alright, I will remember anyway. Rock it like a two-step, then call the doctor. Then call the doctor. So you got a little foot pain, unexpected weight gain. It's time to refrain from what you do. A little ice in your cup, sounding bites, that's what's up from an overless point of view. You see, I can't tell you that you really need to learn. It's no fun walking around when you got hot burn. Alright, it's time to know that you really need to go and call the doctor. Call the doctor.
Support for community programming provided by Betts Plumbing and Heating Supply Company, an independent, family-owned wholesaler serving Westfield for over 50 years, specializing in plumbing, heating, and industrial piping supplies. Visit bettsplumbing.com or 14 Coleman Avenue, Westfield. Public welcome.
Where will the superintendent spotlight shine next? Join Stefan Zaporowski and Chris Rogers every Thursday at 9 a.m. to find out. 107.5 FM WSFD. Live from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy, this is WCPC Channel 15 and 107.5 FM WSFD-LP Westfield.
Good morning, Westfield. It is 6:23. You are indeed listening to WSFD 107.5 FM on your dial, and you are watching WCPC Cable Channel 15. My name is Tina Gorman. I am your Wake Up Wednesday host. I am in the studio this morning with our resident primary care physician, Dr. Akinyele Lovelace, who, by the way, Dr. Lovelace, so I found this in the Westfield News. This was dated, so this was 2 weeks ago. I've been hanging on to it till you joined us. Westfield doctor takes lead on Bay State Health's Board of Trustees. So congratulations.
Thank you.
So what does that mean? That you are now the chair, right, of the Board of Trustees. So what does that mean?
That means that I and the other board members are really in charge of governance and making sure that we are doing our fiduciary responsibility when making sure that leadership, and there's been a lot of new leadership at Bay State.
Yeah.
Is really doing what's best for the system at large.
Okay.
And so the goal here is to really ensuring and making sure that we have all the right people at the table that can really help guide the leadership team in understanding how their decisions will impact the community, how their decisions will impact, the checkbook, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And ensuring that there is something for us to have, not just for this year or 5 years from now, but long term, right? And so that is the responsibility that I've been tasked to do, and what it really also means is that I have a much more closer relationship with the leadership team at Bay State Health, and really trying to articulate what the needs are, what the issues are, and then how does that work big picture. So it's not so much about the nitty gritty about, I can't get into this or ER wait time was this long. Although those are very concerning issues, that's not really the focus of what the board is responsible
That's
for.
the job of the leadership team, right? You're the big picture people.
We are the big picture people.
Yeah, the visionaries.
Yeah.
And holding them accountable.
Yes.
Right? So it's more about accountability, right? And so I think what's important about this role in this position right now is that there has been a significant change in leadership, right? We had some previous leaders who were, I would say, more homegrown.
Yep.
And over the past decade, right?
Yep.
And so this is now an opportunity where we're having to really redefine what healthcare is going to look like, not just for 2026. Wow. Not just for 2026, but we're looking at what it's going to look like for 2030, right? And so the larger discussions are going to be, well, how does this one big beautiful bill really impact the healthcare system at large? What does it mean when the state of Massachusetts has to balance its budget? And what happens when there's shortcomings that fall from that? And how does that affect the system? And then how are we going to project what can be delivered upon, not just for 2027, but for 2030? And what are the steps that are necessary in order to making sure that Bay State remains Bay State, right? Or does it need to become something different, right? And so there's a lot of what they call headwinds, right? I love that term.
That's one I have not heard.
Headwinds. There are headwinds that are coming, meaning
there are headwinds that are coming.
Right?
That's for sure.
There are a lot of headwinds that are coming in healthcare, right? And
Yes.
but what we also still need is we need someone who's going to understand that there's always going to be headwinds, right? In my entire lifetime, healthcare has always had something going on, right? It's never been in my lifetime stable in that way where you could just go to sleep, wake up, and everything is okay. There's always something. And so the purpose of this role and the way I envision it going is that we need people, we need members of the community to still want to continue to participate and be clear-eyed and focused and not get too emotional about the ups and downs that may occur, but to have a real clear thought about where we're going. And so that is the purpose of the position, and that's what I hope to kind of achieve as we continue to move forward and try to make an even better Bay State Health organization.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, you're in the news. I mean, Bay State's in the news. Healthcare is in the news in general. I was just listening to Richie Neal on NPR being interviewed, I think, yesterday, and talking about, healthcare, the the big bill, as he refers to it, not necessarily so beautiful, but and how that's affecting, how that's going to affect us, and it is.
It is going to affect us in a very large way.
Yeah.
And so how do we navigate those waters?
Yeah.
And how do we get there, right? And so there isn't there. So yes, it should be in the news. I'm really happy that it's in the news because this is going to be very impactful. And I think the impact has not been felt just yet.
Yes.
But the impact will come. It will start to come next year. But the following 2 to 3 years are going to be really, really tough for a certain subset of the population. And it's going to impact the hospital systems even more. Mm-hmm. And so that's an important message that needs to get out. So I'm happy that a lot of our government officials are starting to beat that drum because this is really, really important right now. And so I'm happy to hear that it's in the news.
Yeah, I mean, he was throwing around a lot of statistics, particularly about Bay State. I don't want to misquote, but I think he said that like 70% of its funding is coming from Medicare and Medicaid. So those are big. That's a big percentage. Those are big government programs. And I think his message was we need to pay attention to all this stuff, and that's a great message because we do.
And that's a great point, right? So we tend to say that yes, 70% of Bay State Health as organizations is all government payer, right? And so when we notice that inflation continues to go up 3%, right? Like we can just say that. However, the rates in which we reimburse our hospitals and our doctors and our providers stays flat. What that actually is saying is that they're going to operate at a loss, right? And so if 70% of what you take in makes you 70 cents on the dollar, that math doesn't math.
Yeah.
Like it will never math.
Yeah.
And so where are you going to pull that extra 30 cents from that you're no longer getting? And there's no guarantee that you're even going to get that 70 cents on the dollar that you're working towards, right? And so that's where the real discussion comes from. When we start having these conversations about health systems and healthcare and commercial insurance and the insurance that I have and my premiums continue to go up, well, there's good reason why those premiums go up. And it has a direct relationship with our relationship with how the federal government and then the state really works with how they're wanting to distribute funds when it comes to healthcare.
Right.
And it is a big deal.
It is a big deal. And, I think the other thing, just to make it even more complicated, is we're still dealing with, the baby boomers aging. So we have this aging population. And, the fact of the matter is when you have an aging population, you probably have a less healthy population. And we're going to talk about that because today's topic is the heart, and we're talking about Heart Health Month. But, that's why all of this prevention is so important because, the fewer times you have to go to the hospital, the better off you are financially.
And to your point, though, I also, the great news, right? The great news is that we are living longer, right? Like
yes.
For those who believe in science, right? We are actually, we are actually living longer, right? Like that is happening. I think the question also becomes, well, did you really need to retire at 65, right? Like,
agreed.
Right. Is that absolute? Is it an absolute thing?
Right.
Because what that means is for those baby boomers, a lot of them have believed in the promise that their Social Security was supposed to handle and take care of everything. Well, that's true to a certain extent. It should. That was the promise that we made, or that that has been made to us, right?
Yep.
And I think that's a fair concept. I think the other portion to it is I think that we also have pushed out a good portion of our working force that really could have stayed.
Absolutely.
But we kind of pushed them out for a variety of different reasons, and so then they are kind of stuck in this scenario. And then what also happens is that once you decide to do that, and the other key thing is yes, once you get to like 65 and above, you do need more resources just to kind of continue to maintain the things that you maintain. And so for a lot of adults, they're kind of stuck in whatever healthcare system they have, and they're counting on that healthcare system because it's really hard to relocate if you have to get an infusion every
Yes.
Friday
Yes.
to keep your cancer in remission, right? Like,
Yeah.
so there's some other things that just occur as we get a little bit older. And to your point, yes, as we get older, the likelihood that you're going to have other kinds of medical conditions that need to be monitored and treated becomes a thing. And so you do need your healthcare system.
Well, and it's interesting that you bring up the whole retirement thing, because one of the things that I've said is that I am over the age of 65. However, and so I'm on Medicare. I have Medicare Part A, but because I work, I'm under my work health insurance. So Medicare, I don't think we've billed Medicare for anything, because everything that I've done is cover. I keep rolling along, and my Gary's under my plan with me. So, it's a savings to the government to that program, because I'm still paying privately for health insurance, and the city's, matching whatever we do. So it's a big benefit. It's one of the reasons that I'm still working. It's like, well, I like my health insurance. I want to keep my health insurance. I also love my job, and I want to keep my job. So, why not? And I agree. To me, it's like 65 is a number,
Agreed. And but it's with the expectation that you're probably going to live another 30 to 40 years, right? And so that's a long runway.
It
right?
certainly is.
So how do we continue to making sure that we keep it nice and steady and consistent and constant? And I think that's why, to your point, our discussion today about heart health is so key.
Yeah. It's interesting, and we're going to segue right into that. Back in 1935, when they started Social Security, the life expectancy was nowhere close to what it is now. And that was part of the thing. I mean, they started and they said, okay, well, we'll pay out to people when they're 65. And the idea was nobody was going to collect for more than, maybe 5 or 10 years at the most. It was never implemented so that somebody was collecting Social Security for 35 years. But in fact, that happens, So let's segue into that. You are listening to WSFD 107.5 FM on your dial, and you're watching WCPC Cable Channel 15. My guest this morning is Dr. Akinyele Lovelace. Dr. Lovelace is a primary care physician with Family Medicine Associates here in Westfield. It is Heart Health Month, so that is the topic of the day, and we just did this wonderful, segue into why it's important for preventative medicine, keeping ourselves as healthy as possible. So take it away, Dr. Lovelace.
So February, once again, is recognized nationally as American Heart Month. And at a time we focus on cardiovascular health across the country, I want to bring to the conversation, I want to bring it a little bit closer to home.
Okay.
Right here in Massachusetts, heart disease remains one of the leading causes of death. In fact, roughly 1 out of every 5 deaths in our state is related to heart disease. And when you combine heart disease with stroke and other cardiovascular conditions, it accounts for nearly 1/3 of all deaths statewide.
That's a big percentage.
It's huge.
Yeah.
Now, Massachusetts is often ranked as one of the healthiest states in the nation. We have world-class hospitals.
Yeah.
We have access to advanced care. We have extraordinary medical innovation. And yet, despite all of that, heart disease continues to impact thousands of families each year. That tells us something important. It just isn't about access to emergency care. It's about prevention, like we talked about. Mm-hmm. Most heart attacks don't begin in the emergency room.
Right.
They begin quietly, years earlier, with elevated blood pressure, rising blood sugar, increased stress, poor sleep, gradual weight gain. Mm-hmm. They develop in small, daily patterns that often don't cause symptoms until the damage is already underway. The encouraging news is much of heart disease is preventable, not perfectly preventable, but meaningfully preventable. Through awareness, the early action, through small, consistent decisions made over time. So during American Heart Month, it isn't about fear. It's about empowerment. It's about knowing your numbers, moving your body, improving nutrition, managing stress, and seeking care before a crisis occurs. The heart is remarkably resilient, and so are we when we decide to act early.
Yeah. I couldn't agree more. I think that's a great introduction, because the one thing about heart disease, as scary as those statistics are, it can be preventable. I mean, there's a lot that we can do. And so, that power and control that we have, so important. So tell us, what do we do? And by the way, I just want to mention, today is Ash Wednesday, so it is the first day of Lent, and whether you're Catholic or not, or whatever religion, there are all kinds of other religions going on this week as well. But it is a time for me, even more than New Year's, I find Lent to be a great time to begin to say, let's make some changes here. Let's make some positive changes because it's 40 days, folks. So you got like 6 weeks. And when you start to make changes, seriously, over a 6-week period, that's how long it takes to really say, hey, you know what? Now I've kind of incorporated this into my lifestyle. So let's talk about some of those things that we can do during Lent and beyond to make ourselves more heart healthy.
So there's five things that we should really take into account, and we could call them 5 pillars, however you want to look at it. But I know I threw some statistics out there, but there's really 5 things that we need to start considering. Number 1 is know your numbers.
Yeah.
Right? Know your numbers. So blood pressure. Let's talk about it.
Okay.
Right? So I have a lot of people that will come in and they'll say, hey, Dr. Lovelace, my blood pressures have always been good. I said, okay, well, what are they? Well, No, I'm sorry, I don't know. What are they really? Well, they're 120 over 80. I said, oh, okay, 120 over 80, which is a great thing to tell me. But that's not actually how the human body works, right? So the likelihood that every time you check your blood pressure, it's always 120 over 80 is probably not the case. Our bodies are not a car that you can put in cruise control and just set it and forget it, right? Like that's not a thing, right?
Love it.
But there should be some variability there, right? And if you're actually checking your blood pressure consistently, you'll learn something about yourself. You may learn that, well, when I get up in the morning, it's a little bit higher, and right before I go to bed, it's a little bit lower, or after I have my coffee, it does this, or after, and so the goal here is to understand the fact that no matter how old you are, and especially for those, once you're, after 35 and you're starting to get into your 40s, you might want to start checking your blood pressure. You don't have to check it every day, but you want to check it. And the reason is because hypertension or elevated blood pressure is something that's correctable and fixable. Mm-hmm. And yes, for some, it can be done by what you eat and exercise, and we'll get into all of that. But just accept where you are at that time, irrespective of what you think you can do at the very beginning or what you think is going to happen 5 or 10 or whatever timeline that you have in mind, but just accept it for what it is. And if you notice that the top number is greater than 140 and the bottom number is greater than 90 consistently, you probably need to start talking to a primary care provider or talk to a doctor or talk to somebody and start coming up with a plan as to how you're going to address this.
Okay.
Because what we've started to notice is that untreated hypertension or elevated blood pressure increases your risk for heart disease. But it's a number that you could fix and you could make some real impact on. So that's the first number that we need to be mindful of. So blood pressure.
Okay.
The second one is going to be understanding what your blood sugar numbers are.
Yeah, I think that can be really just confusing for people.
It can be very confusing.
Yeah.
And so the question here becomes, all right, doc, was my fasting blood sugar elevated? Because a lot of times, a lot of adults will ask or think about wanting to do their fasting blood work. Do I need to do blood work before I come in? I'm like, no, man, I don't care about your blood work. I care about you, but we could talk about it. But the question is if you did fasting blood work, well, what was your blood sugar? And if your blood sugar was slightly at risk or elevated by the provider, then that's something you need to know about, right? And then the conversation becomes, doctor, am I pre-diabetic?
Yeah.
Right? So what does that actually mean? That means that you consistently have elevated blood sugars after you eat. So your sugar levels are a bit high. They come down, but they're just ever so slightly elevated. That is another risk, right?
Okay.
And so that's something that you want to address, meaning that, well, maybe I should pay attention to what I'm eating a little bit more clearly. Man, Dr. Lovelace asked me if I eat a vegetable for breakfast. That sounds so weird. Who eats vegetables for breakfast? Well, those who have better blood sugars. And that's usually my response, right? And so those are the things that we start to kind of think about and have conversations with. And the last number that I'll just bring up that we should probably know is something called your LDL, right? So knowing what your blood pressure is, knowing what your average blood sugar is or just what your sugar is, and then understanding what your LDL is. Now, LDL is your low density lipoprotein. And what are lipoproteins? Lipoproteins are the actual fats. We'll call it, it's part of your cholesterol panel. Let's just say that much. It's part of your cholesterol panel, and we typically call this your bad cholesterol.
Right.
And what we do know is that when this is abnormally elevated, it also increases your risk for heart disease. And so just knowing those numbers could be so impactful in how you start to make decisions about how you're going to live your life. And I'm not saying that this is something that you need to fix like today. I always tell my patients, I'm not worried about who you are at 35 or 45. I'm actually worried about who you're going to be at 75 and 85, because that's when I really am in your life a lot more consistently. That's when I might be seeing you every 3 months, every 6 months. And for some, that sounds like a horrible idea. And for others, they don't necessarily care or mind. But the fact that you need to be monitored that aggressively could be something that you may not be interested in. So what I say is here's an opportunity to act now, but do it on a much more consistent basis.
Okay. If you're just joining me, my guest this morning is Dr. Akinyele Lovelace. Dr. Lovelace is a primary care physician with Family Medicine Associates here in Westfield. The topic this month is Heart Health Month. And we're kind of going through the steps to, sort of I would call them proactive steps. So, as you said, if somebody goes to the ED and they are having a heart attack, that didn't just happen overnight. Like it didn't happen within the last hour. I mean, this is something that's probably been going on for months and probably even years, where you have breakdowns and so forth. So it's really trying to, to stay on top of things. And I think, for a lot of people in the old days, all the responsibility was put on the physician. Well, the doctor's going to tell me what to do. The doctor's going to give me medicine. And, we really empowered physicians. I had this conversation with somebody at work not long ago. And I said, they said the same thing. Remember the old days? You would go to the doctor and everything would be like in a manila folder outside the door. Yep. And you never were allowed to see whatever was in that folder, You went to the hospital and, back in the day, if you're visiting your loved one who was in there with, having had a stroke or a heart attack or whatever, and the doctor came in, you left the room. It's like, oh, the doctor's going to examine the patient and I'm only a family member. What do I know? We don't do that anymore because we realize that that's not helpful to people. They need to take charge of their own health. Their families, I always say, most people are not an island. They come with families. In my world, in a lot of cases, I work with spouses. I'm sure you do too. If the husband comes in with a heart condition, I saw this in my own family with my husband's parents. My mother-in-law was doing the cooking. So after my father had the heart surgery, it was my mother-in-law who was saying to the doctor, what do we need to do here? What's the protocol? What's a better nutrition program? And she really took charge of it.
And so my problem with that scenario, though, is the fact that wasn't the patient did not ask that question.
Correct.
We left it up to someone else to account for our own personal health.
Correct.
And that's the problem that I have in the scenario, is not the fact that they're agreed. So yes, the person has the disease, but the illness can affect the family.
Absolutely.
And I don't disagree with that at all.
Yeah.
My problem, as we've continued to go down this process, is that the person themselves was not accountable. And on top of that, they didn't back away from the table when they should have. No one encouraged them to get up and walk around when they probably were advised to do so. And so that narrative, I love that conversation about what has happened. I agree. In the olden days, we had folders, you had a file. Even the doctor's notes were written on a basic note card. So it was more about common sense and potentially doing what you're told, and even still people didn't do what they were told. Sure. And so I think the good news is that heart disease, we've actually decreased the amount of long-term debilitating things that have occurred with heart disease, right? When's the last time you heard someone passed away from a heart attack?
Yeah.
That's very rare these days compared to what we saw in the 80s, God forbid the 70s, but 80s and 90s. We saw a real turn in how we could really prevent or decrease the amount of deaths from heart disease. But we learned a lot.
Yeah.
And so what ended up happening was that a lot of people started to be prescribed certain types of medications on a more consistent basis. And a large portion of the population was like, wait a minute, does everyone need to be on these medications? Right. And so we started to have conversations about medicating people to a certain extent when we probably should have leaned more into, I understand that, Joe had a heart attack and his wife's always been cooking for him. And what should we be cooking differently? And the conversation also should have been about, well, hey, are you guys ever going to get up and start doing some more activities collectively together? are you going to hold each other accountable for trying to get about 150, 1,500, or how many minutes a day are you guys going to move? If you're going to get 150 minutes in a week, that really works for you when it comes to just moving. Are you going to get 10,000 steps? Are you going to dedicate 20 minutes to 30 minutes of just moving? I don't care if it's snowing outside. I don't care if it's too hot outside. I don't care if the leaves are falling off the tree. I don't care if it's raining. Like, are you guys going to do something that's moving, right? Because the other part is, and to your point, there were some older thoughts that we did when someone had a heart attack. My God, we made them lay in bed.
Bed rest. It was bed rest for like 3 weeks.
It was bed rest for forever.
Yes.
And that probably wasn't the best recommendation looking back at it.
Well, we didn't know.
We didn't know.
Now we know.
But now we know, right? Yeah. And so I think the other thing that we know now is that you have to continue to stay moving and to stay active.
Yeah.
And so I think that is the other portion to this. And I do agree that it is a family thing. It is a collective thing, because it's so interesting when you have family members come over and their perception for what a serving of ice cream could be, or what a snack looks like.
Yes.
For some people, a snack could be your entire meal that you might have had.
Right.
Compared to other people, a snack really could just be, something really small.
Right.
But it's all very comparative.
An apple. Exactly,
right? But for some, it's like, no, it's an apple pie. That's a snack, right? So,
right.
So I think our conversation as to how we have moved as a healthcare system, and moving from that paternalistic approach to a much more, all-encompassing approach, I think is really good. I think where we're lacking is really where we're supporting each other when it comes to our preventative health goals and what we're looking to do. I think the other difference, when we start to look at what happened in the 50s and in the 60s, is how we prepared our food. Yeah. Right? Okay. So the quality of food, so food quality, right, I do think is a really, really important concept.
So talk about that.
So my parents would go get a Coke, right? Or they would actually go to the malt shop, right? Like, it was a thing.
Yes, and it was called the malt shop.
To get a soda, right?
Yeah, or the soda shop.
The soda shop. Now, right? Now it is so readily accessible that you could get it anywhere, right? Sure. And so soda, and I don't want to bang on the soda industry, but the amount of access that we have to foods that are overly processed has grown exponentially.
Yes.
Right? So I can vividly remember, my grandparents, they had a farm.
Okay.
My other grandparents had a farm. Like, they had access to real fruits and vegetables.
Fresh
right?
veggies, yeah.
We picked apples off the tree. We made preserves. We picked corn. Like, I remember those things. And so you had better quality food. And so the other issues that we're seeing when it comes to heart health is that those that have access and those that are choosing to avoid the frozen food section traditionally have a better idea, or just a better life expectancy overall. Now, that's just me from just making my observations.
No. I get you, yep.
But we have to pay attention to the concept that, you mean to tell me I can store something and not eat it for a whole month and a half, and it still be okay in my body? That sounds kind of odd when I say it out loud. So when we talk about preservatives, right, the body doesn't know what preservatives technically are, right?
Okay.
Preservative, so it will just kind of turn it into a fat, right?
Okay.
That's usually what we do, right? So when that occurs, where does that fat go, right? That fat will collect typically on our bellies. It'll collect in our arteries and in our heart. And so the key thing that we have to keep in mind, and one of the big differences as to why we see such an exponential growth in obesity amongst our children and even amongst adults, is that we've had access to a lot of overly processed foods that are so readily available to us, that are in our face. And that is also becoming a bigger issue, because what we're actually doing is we're just giving ourselves just pure sugar.
Yes.
Right?
It also isn't a question of time. Like,
yep.
We don't have two people working, now kids working, sports. There's no time to prepare the food, so people are looking for quicker ways to get food on the table.
Agreed. Agreed. And we also our priorities, though, right? Like I think we prioritize things in a very interesting way. You don't want to eat the leftovers? Why don't you want to eat the leftovers? We could prepare those the night before. We could get up earlier and prepare those things earlier so that we have the appropriate things that we need to eat.
Yeah.
But to your point, I agree. A lot of times it's a lot easier, right? There's a convenience that we have here, right? So I don't know. The last time I went and got McDonald's, I felt like I spent a lot of money that I didn't need to spend on for a hamburger and fries and a very large drink. And I felt like it used to be a lot cheaper. I felt like I could feed a family of four for $20 at McDonald's, which has now exponentially grown to like $50.
Yeah.
Why am I spending $50 at McDonald's? What just happened?
Exactly.
Right? So, but I agree. I do think, and to Pete's point, he makes a really good point. A lot of people don't have the time necessarily to really lean into their nutritional health, and whether it's just by choice or whether they just don't understand, it is making a huge impact on us. And if you add on top of the fact that depending upon what community you live in, if you go into the grocery store, and I always say this, I when I want to learn about a community, I go to the grocery store.
Absolutely.
And I look and see the amount of vegetables to the amount of frozen foods that are located in there.
Yep.
And that tells me everything I need to know really about the life expectancy about this community. Because if I know that there's a much larger frozen food section, I absolutely already know that the incidence of diabetes and hypertension or heart disease is going to go up exponentially from that. And that's a big thing that I've started to notice in my lifetime in picking communities that I choose to work in.
Yeah. I would just dovetail all of that with my two P's, planning and priorities. So I mean, I work a lot of hours. I have a busy home life and so forth. But I also feel that nutrition is incredibly important. And so, there is some planning involved. And, sometimes it's like, okay, this is the weekend. We're going to do some cooking here, and and I cook in quantity. If I'll tell you right now, if my family didn't eat leftovers, they would starve, because I typically am making meals counting on 2 to 3 days worth of dinner, especially if I'm going to be, we work weird schedules. I mean, we don't work 9 to 5, and a lot of people don't. My daughter often works closing, so she's not even getting home till 8:30. And I'm all over the map, and my husband's all over the map. So I think it does take some planning. And that means sometimes, like, for the next week, okay, what's on the calendar this week that we know we're all going to get home late on, Wednesday night. And we got to have something in mind, because otherwise, you're right. You're grabbing something from the freezer. You're stopping someplace for something. It doesn't work. And I think the other thing is priorities. And I think, sometimes when we get into, we're so busy, we don't have time. How much time did you spend on your phone today? Seriously, I'm dead serious, because I'm so anti screen, all this stuff, And so it's like, really, you didn't have a half an hour here or there? Well, you just spent, how much time online or how much time gaming. So again, and I'm not saying that that you shouldn't ever do that, but I am saying there are so many hours in a day.
Agreed.
You have to prioritize.
So, and to your point about, and there's something else that came up here that I think is so important. We have sometimes very odd hours, right? We have very odd hours when it comes to timing.
Yes.
And when we feed ourselves is also pretty important here, right? And so the conversation about what we eat. So if you just imagine that if you were deciding that you worked late and all of a sudden you felt the need that you had to eat something, and you decide to eat right before you go to bed, well, that may not have been the best choice for your body. Because now you're giving your body another job that it needs to do, instead of it just trying to sleep.
Yep.
And to kind of reset and work through everything that occurred from the day. And the reason why I bring that up is because sleep is a big deal. And depending upon what you feed yourself, you can offset your sleep cycle, right? And so that's the other part to this. And so if you're not getting the appropriate amount of sleep, that also will affect your stress levels, right? And so that then creates a different dynamic. So then are you trying to just eat because you're trying to stay awake? Or are you trying to eat because you emotionally you're just not where you need to be? And is this just because of the fact that you haven't been sleeping appropriately and consistently at the right time? And saying to yourself, well, listen, I need to be going to bed at this time. I probably shouldn't eat this many hours before I go to bed, because all it's going to do is just create more stress in my body.
Yeah.
What a lot of people what I see is that they just tend to say, well, I just need to eat because I need to eat. And sometimes they just need to eat because they just want to feel good, right? And I'm eating just because of how it makes me feel, but not, is that really what's good for your body? And so then the next conversation then dovetails into prioritizing your sleep. And prioritizing your sleep just as much as you might prioritize your nutrition, and say, all right, this is my cutoff. And so I'm going to go to bed at this time consistently every time. And if I haven't had a whole meal or whole dinner, maybe I don't necessarily need it. I think I'm going to live and be okay. And what that actually does is that brings down a lot of different stress levels. And the one stress level that we always need to be really conscious of is our insulin levels. And so what is insulin? Insulin is that carrier that allows our body to absorb our sugar. But if it's running rampant consistently in our body all the time, 24/7, that creates a different level of stress and inflammation in our body. And the goal, especially when we're going to lay down or go to bed, is to really try to reduce those stress levels, both externally, meaning like, oh my God, I'm stressed about work, or I've got to do this, or what's happening internally when it comes to the amount of sugars that we're taking in and what we're doing chemically within our body. That's a perceived stress as well. So those things have to be taken into account when we think about what's happening. And last but not least, no one has ever told me that their blood pressure medication tastes good.
Yeah.
Like, no one ever says that.
Right.
No one ever says to me, Dr. Lovelace, that metoprolol, that was absolutely delicious.
Yeah.
I finished it off with a glass of wine. It went so well. And so my other part to this is nutrition. It's not always about what you feel like eating or whether, yes, it should taste good, but sometimes you have to do it. And a lot of times, a lot of adults are just rebelling. They know they should be eating their fruits and vegetables, but they're choosing not to. And the same thing comes with their sleep. You know you should be going to bed on time, but you're choosing not to because, to your point, you're on your phone scrolling all the time, or you're watching television, and so you're distracting your brain from doing what it needs to be doing, which is focusing on going to sleep.
All right. So we threw a lot at you. You'll notice that I took no song
Yeah.
breaks, even though I had songs. But we had a lot to discuss. And
I'd
also
like to be
would
playing an applause effect during the end of his speech right there, because I think it deserves an applause effect.
Well, I think the other thing is obviously this is a huge topic. So I'm going to say this was part one.
Yeah.
And we're going to phase into part two next month when you come back.
Look forward to it.
Dr. Akinyele Lovelace, thank you for joining us. Thank you for the, sort of sharing a little bit about your role at Bay State on the Board of Trustees, and congratulations on that. But
Appreciate
I think,
it.
again, politically, we need to kind of keep an eye on that, folks. I mean, it's healthcare, it's our health. And so it all, we're in the nitty gritty of hard health, but the big picture health is also important.
It's huge.
It is 7 o'clock. You are listening to WSFD 107.5 FM on your dial, and you are watching WCPC Cable Channel 15. We're going to take our top of the hour break, and when we come back, Maureen Groden is going to join us.
Support for community radio provided by Westfield Electroplating. Employing over 140 skilled platers, painters, and technicians, Westfield Electroplating was founded in 1946 and was the first company in the country to achieve National Aerospace and Defense Contractor Program accreditation, proudly maintaining that status for over a decade. Westfield Electroplating provides over 50 quality finishes to meet your corrosion, cosmetic, or performance needs. On the web at www.westfieldplating.com or 413-568-3716. Westfield Electroplating, putting the finishing touches on technology.
Underwriting for the community programming is provided by the Boys and Girls Club of Greater Westfield, serving the youth of the Whip City and surrounding communities since 1969. For more information on the Great Futures Club for ages 3 to 5, happening weekdays, and the Club Teen Center for ages 11 and older, weekdays from 6:30 till 8 p.m., go online at bcgwestfield.org or visit the club at 28 West Silver Street. The Boys and Girls Club of Greater Westfield. Great futures start here.
Hi, it's Bob Plass, and I have Wow, It's Tuesday, every Tuesday, 6 to 8. Wow, it's Tuesday.
Community Radio.
107.5 FM, WSFD.
I did it!
Live from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy, this is WCPC Channel 15 and 107.5 FM, WSFD-LP, Westfield.
Put your headphones on. Good morning, Westfield. It is 7:04. You are listening to WSFD 107.5 FM on your dial, and you are watching WCPC Cable Channel 15. My name is Tina Gorman. I am your Wake Up Wednesday host. And this morning in the studio is my second guest. We just had that was a really great discussion with Dr. Lovelace. So I so appreciate Dr. Lovelace is he is a monthly guest. And we've covered a whole bunch of topics in the last 11, almost 12 years with him. My guest this morning, second hour, is Maureen Groden. Maureen is an RN. She is a hospice nurse and educator. And now she's an author. So we are going to, it is. It's exciting. It's exciting for us to have you. And it's a really interesting topic. As I mentioned earlier, for those who watch the show on a regular basis, last week I had John Kroll on, and John works for Hospice of Western and Central Massachusetts. And his role there is more on the business side of it. So we really talked more about what for lack of a better phraseology, is the business of hospice. Mm-hmm. So he kind of got into, health insurance and who picks up what and how to, legal definitions. So we got into some of that, knowing that I was going to have you come on this week, and we're going to talk more about the care of hospice. So it's, it's sort of approaching it from two completely different angles. Mm-hmm. But before we do that, Maureen, when I have a new guest on my show, I like for my viewers and my listeners to kind of know who they are. So we like to start with things like, where are you from, and where did you grow up, and where did you get educated, and when did you decide you wanted to be a nurse, and those kinds of things. So fill us on who is Maureen Groden?
I'm happy to do that. And that's usually where I start when I meet patients too. I'm just so fascinated by people's backgrounds. So yeah. I grew up in a large Irish family just outside of Boston. My mother was a nurse, my dad was a doctor, and I'm sure that's what made me interested in nursing, although when I first started at UMass, I was actually a zoology major. So anyway, I went to UMass as an undergraduate, thinking that I would go into pediatric nursing because I had so many nieces and nephews and children in the family. But while I was at UMass, I was very interested in also end-of-life care. I read Elizabeth Kubler-Ross's book, and I think that was a really seminal event for me as a budding nurse. Mm-hmm. So I ended up working for a couple of different hospitals, one in the Boston area, one in California, before coming back to Western Mass because I loved Western Mass. And since I've been back in Western Mass for many, many, many years, I've worked in the community. So primarily VNA initially, and then hospice.
So VNA, for those, we have to be careful with initials. So that's a Visiting Nurse Association. Yep. And so when you came back to Western Mass, you were where? So give us some of the places that you were working.
Yeah, my first job in Western Mass was with the Greenfield Visiting Nurses, and I had a wonderful territory of driving to visit people in Salt Deerfield and Old Deerfield and Conway. And then I worked in the Springfield area for an agency called Roncalli Home Health Care.
I remember it.
Yeah, so then after that, I went back to graduate school at University of Connecticut, and my whole program was geared towards end-of-life care, humanism, ethics. And from there, I started teaching a little bit. I taught first at AIC a little bit. I've also taught at Elms, but primarily at University of Massachusetts. And at the same time, worked at hospices. So I've worked at most of the Western Mass hospices, either as a manager, director, or bringing students to these agencies as a faculty member.
Okay. Well, I had an opportunity because I did my graduate when I was in the rehab program at Springfield College for my graduate work, and I was doing my internship at the Hospice of Hampshire County at the time. So this was back in the 80s, early 80s. And I had an opportunity through that internship, and the director then, Joan Kachakian, and we actually got to see Dr. Kubler-Ross in Boston. So we heard her do a presentation, which was, probably the highlight of my graduate career. So that was pretty exciting. Yeah. And I was actually introduced to the hospice concept when I was living out in Davenport, Iowa. My husband was in graduate school. I was working at a continuing care retirement community. And I was working in the healthcare section of that. And the director of nursing said to me, like on my second or third day of work, she goes, well, just so that you know, we participate in the hospice program here. And I kind of went, okay, that's nice. What is that? I had no idea what that meant. I was a social work major in college, but it was, that was back in the 70s. It was still a relatively new concept. Right. And so, so that was my introduction. I said to her, I don't really know anything about it. And so the next day she came in, and I'm not kidding, Maureen, she had 7 books. Of course, Kubler-Ross's was one of them, but on, all about end-of-life care, hospice, palliative care, you name it. And she said, here you go. Because I said to her, I'm anxious to learn. Would you have some materials for me? Oh, yes, she did. And that was kind of the beginning for me. And then when I got into grad school, I knew that was something that I was interested in. Not necessarily just that, but I just wanted that concept. Of course, now I work with older adults, so it's all kind of part of the process. Well, there are a lot of things about hospice, about the concept of hospice. I think there are a lot of myths out there. I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about what it is, what happens. And John addressed last week a little bit about when do we make that decision that it's end of life care as opposed to, curative. So there's a lot. I think there's a lot that we're going to cover. So now that we know a little bit about your nursing background. And now, you said your dad was a physician, and what did he specialize in? Was he primary care? Or?
In the early days, he was an OBGYN doctor, so obstetrics gynecology. Yep. But then he became the town doctor because he did all the town physicals, school physicals and so forth. So he broadened his practice to be more family practice. And then he was actually a medical examiner.
Oh, wow. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I had the opportunity during nursing school to actually go with him on a number of things. And my mom worked for 20 years at Rentham State School, taking care of people with disabilities, and it was back during the 70s, so she was very involved in deinstitutionalization and moving people into the community. So they both impacted me very much, and my book is actually dedicated to them.
Oh, I'm really excited about this book. All right. If you're just joining me, my guest this morning is Maureen Groden. Maureen is a hospice nurse, educator, and now author. So we're going to talk a little bit about her brand new book, which was just released yesterday, right?
Yesterday.
I looked at the date. Oh my gosh, and I've got her on the show, 7 o'clock in the morning. I'm pretty excited about that.
Yeah, thank you.
So let's take a short break. You are listening to WSFD 107.5 FM on your dial. You are watching cable channel 15, WCPC. So let's we're going to start with Sarah McLachlan singing Angel, and we'll be back.
You spend all your time waiting for that second chance, for the break that would make it okay. There's always some reason You're so tired of the straight line, and everywhere you turn, there's vultures and thieves at your back. The storm keeps on twisting. You keep on building the lies that you make up for all that you lack. It don't make no difference. Escape the one last time. It's easier to believe in this sweet madness, all this glorious sadness that brings me to my knees. In the arms of the angel, far away from here, from this star-cold hotel room, and the endlessness that you fear. Oh, you are pulled from your wreckage of your silent reverie. You're in the arms of the angel. May you find some comfort here. In the arms of your angel, may you find some comfort
Support for community radio provided by Westfield Electroplating. Employing over 140 skilled platers, painters, and technicians, Westfield Electroplating was founded in 1946 and was the first company in the country to achieve National Aerospace and Defense Contractor Program accreditation, proudly maintaining that status for over a decade. Westfield Electroplating provides over 50 quality finishes to meet your corrosion, cosmetic, or performance needs. On the web at www.westfieldplating.com or 413-568-3716. Westfield Electroplating, putting the finishing touches on technology.
Join us the second Wednesday of every month for Joe Didi's take on, well, everything. Listen to The Joe Didi Show, second Wednesday of every month at 8 a.m. 107.5 FM WSFD. Live from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy, this is WCPC Channel 15 and 107.5 FM WSFD-LP Westfield.
Good morning, Westfield. It is 7:19. You are listening to WSFD 107.5 FM on your dial, and you are watching WCPC Cable Channel 15. My name is Tina Gorman. I am your Wake Up Wednesday host, and my guest this hour is Maureen Groden. Maureen is a hospice nurse, educator, and now an author. And the name of your book is When a Loved One is Dying, correct?
Correct. Conversations about care, connection, and coping.
All right. So, Maureen, we had a lively discussion off air during that 4-minute song break by Sarah McLachlan. So, let's start with some of the myths about hospice, because I think there are a lot of myths about hospice. I think there are a lot of misunderstandings about hospice, palliative care. So, start somewhere over there. What are the more common myths that you that you're aware of, and give us what the facts are.
Okay, so I think that one of the biggest myths about hospice care is that people feel like if they sign on to hospice that they have to go somewhere. So that somewhere there's a hospice that they would have to go to. And in fact, 94% of people that sign on to hospice care actually receive care wherever they're living at the time that they sign on. And most people receive hospice care in their home, whether it's a house or a apartment or assisted living or a skilled nursing facility. But pretty much you sign on to hospice care and the hospice team comes to care for you wherever you're actually living. There are a couple of hospice places in Western Massachusetts. One of them is Hospice of the Fisher Home in Amherst, a 9-bed hospice. And then there's a hospice residence. It's actually not specifically a hospice, but it's a place that people can go when they're on hospice care, and it's called Harmony House in Chicopee. But otherwise, most people are receiving hospice care wherever they're living at the time that they sign on to hospice care. People even get hospice care in the hospital. It's a special kind of hospice care called general inpatient hospice care. And so that's probably the biggest myth, I think, of hospice.
And explain, there are a lot of terms that get thrown around when we talk about end-of-life care.
Right.
So one term is palliative care, one term is hospice care. Are they the same thing? Or and if they're not, what's the difference?
Yeah, actually, this the second chapter of my book is called my mother was referred to hospice care. Does that mean she's dying? And actually, that's not at all the case. So it might help to just understand a little bit about the background of both of these programs. So hospice, most people understand more. They've had more experience with hospice. And hospice started in London with St. Christopher's Hospice and Dame Cicely Saunders, who, believe it or not, was a doctor, nurse, and social worker. She started a program because care up to that point was very solo. It was one individual practitioner or physician taking care of somebody. And so the two things that she proposed for end-of-life care was a focus on a team approach, because really if somebody's at the end of life, they're dealing with the physical part of their disease, they're dealing emotionally, socially, financially, spiritually sometimes. And so it really does take a team of people to help people at the end of life. So she came over and did a lecture at Yale University and very much impacted the dean there. And the dean at Yale School of Nursing was one of the people that started hospice care in this country. And so the first hospice was in Connecticut. At the same time this was happening in Canada, attached to mostly cancer units, palliative care started. And the same thing, it was a recognition that people going through cancer care are dealing with an awful lot of things on a lot of levels. So it started with having a doctor, generally also a nurse practitioner, and a social worker helping people on multiple different levels. And so the focus was on a team approach and also symptom management. So symptom management is the same, a team approach is the same, but palliative care is generally for people who are still getting regular treatment in the hospital with their providers, going to skilled nursing facilities if they need rehab. But it's an extra level of care that they get, similar to if there was a consult, for example, of a cardiologist or a nephrologist. So people that are, mostly palliative care is available in the hospital settings where people can get a consult to help them make decisions about, do they want to have resuscitation? What direction of care would they want? If they have a particular symptom that's really burdensome, like pain, difficulty breathing, then palliative care specialists are experts on symptom management. But it's not generally people that are necessarily in the last 6 months of life, which is what the case is with hospice care.
Okay. So, and so talk to us a little bit about the hospice team, because you mentioned sort of this team approach. You've thrown out nurses or nurse practitioners and doctors and social workers. Who makes up the hospice team? Because I know it's more than that.
Right.
I know there are some other people that we wouldn't necessarily expect to be on a medical team.
Right. So hospice, another myth about hospice care is that you have to give up your own doctor, and that's actually not true. When you sign on to hospice care, you select who your doctor is that oversees your care. So, for example, if you have a longstanding PCP or primary care provider, then that's somebody that you're able to choose. If you're getting cancer care and you feel like your oncologist has become the primary person in your care, then you can choose to have the oncologist be the primary overseer of your hospice care. Side by side with your primary care physician is a hospice medical director. And that's a very important role because those two providers are the two people that decide that you're actually eligible for hospice care. And I just wanted to say that every disease, heart disease, lung disease, dementia, Parkinson's, liver disease, they all have a trajectory. In other words, there's a progression of the disease. And when people sign on to hospice care, the physicians, the two providers, make a decision whether somebody's disease is in the last 6 months of life. And all of us in hospice care have guidance from Medicare around what that looks like. So these providers tend to become experts on prognosis, and that's something that's not an exact science, but that's important. Besides the physicians, there's nurses. Nurses are what's called case managers, which is another confusing title because people in the hospital that help to discharge people are also called case managers. So nurse case manager is the term that's used for nurses in hospice care. And then there's what's called the psychosocial team, which includes social workers, bereavement counselors. Hospice does follow people for at least 12 months after the death of their loved one. So that's also a very important part of the team. Also, home health aides help with some personal care. Volunteers are wonderful, and volunteers do all kinds of things. Home health aides do personal care, what's called hands-on care, whereas volunteers tend to do hands-off type care. They'll go to the store, they'll bake things, they'll help people with memory type things, and then some volunteers do all kinds of complementary things like pet therapy, Reiki, music therapy, and so that's basically the hospice team.
Okay. And before we get into some of the stories, because I really want to get into the book and the stories, what exactly is an advanced directive? Like, and should everybody have one? Should you only have one if you have a very serious illness? Well, what is that?
Well, advanced directives, basically medical teams, particularly in Massachusetts, refer to advanced directives as sort of a two-part thing. The first part is, who do you want to choose to make medical decisions for you if you aren't able to make it themselves? And that's a very, very important thing to designate because oftentimes at the end of life, in the last days before usually people pass, they're not fully awake. And so the medical team turns to a healthcare proxy to help make decisions. Or if someone's in acute care and there's a traumatic illness or there's somebody who loses consciousness, it's very important that people choose somebody that will carry out their wishes. So in order to do that, they need to communicate their wishes to somebody. And there's a really good website called the Conversation Project, and that is a great website that helps people understand what's called healthcare proxy and also healthcare surrogate. In Massachusetts, there's a form. Most health settings have the form. It does not require a physician or a lawyer to fill it out. It requires 2 witnesses. So basically, anybody 18 and older should have a healthcare proxy.
Okay.
The other part is where you're making decisions around what medical treatment you would want in the event of emergency. And that's a medical order. That's signed by a nurse practitioner, a physician, or a physician's assistant. And that's basically saying, if my heart stopped, would I want to be resuscitated? If my lungs didn't work, would I want to be on a respirator? Would I want tube feedings or gastric tube feedings? Would I want to have IVs? Would I want to have dialysis? And so that's really a medical order. Right now in the state of Massachusetts, most people are familiar with this, and it's a bright, bright pink form. And it has to be signed by a doctor. It's called Medical Orders for Life-Sustaining Treatment. And this is something that you communicate with your family about and also communicate with your provider about. Right now in the state of Massachusetts, we're transitioning in 2027 to a POLST form.
Right.
And that's a portable order for life-sustaining treatment, and that will go from state to state. It'll go from facility to facility. This will have a lot more, it'll be on the computer too, so that it'll be in your record, so that it'll be able to transfer across settings.
Right. My understanding is that there are some cities and towns that are pilot projects for the Pulsed form at this point, and the transition is supposed to happen when? This is important to me. I'm working on a grant that has to do with this. So, so the transition is supposed to take place in 2027.
Well, yes, it's been pushed out a little bit because it's huge.
It's huge.
It involves emergency medical teams in towns. It involves skilled nursing facilities, hospitals, VNAs, hospices, private physician offices. So it's absolutely huge. And so it's been pushed out. There's quarterly webinars that I've been attending that give the update on where things are at. And yes, there is a pilot project that's going on now, so they can work out all the details.
Out all the bugs and the details. Okay. All right. So that, and just again to clarify before we take a short break and then we start to get into some of the book and some of the stories, there's a difference between like a healthcare proxy, like assigning a person to make your decisions, and then sort of what in the old days we would call a living will, which is, your laundry list of do this, don't do that kind of thing. Of course, the benefit to assigning a person, you can't possibly think of all the things that might happen to write down in a will, and it's circumstantial. I mean, there are a whole lot of, you could say, well, I don't want to be hooked up to a respirator. Well, what if it's just a temporary thing? Well, you know what I mean? You may want to if at the end of it all you come out and you're, kind of unscathed. So that's where I think having that person that you really trust to understand, bottom line, this is it's a quality of life issue for me. This is what I want. This is what I don't want in general terms. But again, I think you need to be a little bit careful about having your list of do this, don't do that, because there are always special circumstances.
And just a reminder that you're able to make your own decisions, that the healthcare proxy does not kick in. And as far as the MOLST or the PULST, it's usually for people that have a serious illness, whereas the healthcare proxy is 18 and older. The PULST and MOLST is really, and what's a serious illness? It's people that have a significant organ disease, like a heart condition, lung condition. It's not someone that has, a little bit of arthritis or something like that. It's usually for people that are dealing with the healthcare system in many, many ways. And also, just so you know, since you mentioned it, the MOLST also allows to say, well, it's just short-term only. In other words, if I have a significant lung disease like COPD or pulmonary fibrosis, and I get pneumonia or the flu on top of it, yes, maybe short-term only, use a respirator, and then hopefully I'll get through that.
Yes.
So you have an option of saying short-term only. So again, this is something that is a conversation with your provider, because it is a medical order, and they can help you decide what would be appropriate for your particular situation.
Perfect. Thank you, Maureen. That helped to really clarify that. All right. If you're just joining me, my guest this morning is Maureen Groden. Maureen is an RN. She's a hospice nurse. She's an educator. She is a brand new author. Is this your first book, Maureen?
It is.
Okay, so we are going to spend most of the time talking about the book, which I'm excited about. You are listening to WSFD 107.5 FM on your dial. You are watching WCPC Cable Channel 15. We're going to take a short break. We're going to listen to Casey Musgraves singing Rainbow. We'll be back.
So tie up the boat, take off your coat, red. Yeah, there's always been a rainbow hanging over your head. It'll all be alright. It's gonna be alright. Everybody stay strong and stay inside.
Underwriting for the community programming is provided by the Boys and Girls Club of Greater Westfield, serving the youth of the Whip City and surrounding communities since 1969. For more information on the Great Futures Club for ages 3 to 5, happening weekdays, and the Club Teen Center for ages 11 and older, weekdays from 6:30 till 8 p.m., go online at bcgwestfield.org or visit the club at 28 West Silver Street. The Boys and Girls Club of Greater Westfield. Great futures start here.
Listen to me, Michael Buster McMahon, Mondays 8 to 10 a.m. to learn the stories behind your favorite songs. Or don't. I'm not the boss of you.
Community Radio.
107.5 FM WSFD. Live from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy, this is WCPC Channel 15 and 107.5 FM WSFD-LP Westfield.
Good morning, Westfield. It is 7:36. You are listening to WSFD 107.5 FM on your dial, and you are watching Cable Channel 15, WCPC. My name is Tina Gorman. I am your Wake Up Wednesday host. This is a show that deals with health and wellness in the broadest sense. And this morning, my very special guest is Maureen Groden. Maureen is an RN. She's a hospice nurse. She's an educator, and she can now claim the title of author. So she has recently written a book. It's called When a Loved One is Dying. I love the other part of this conversations about care, connection, and coping. And so we are going to discuss this book, which was just released yesterday. I couldn't even get a copy of it yet because I was like, well, it's just getting released the day before I was having you on the show. But welcome again, Maureen. Let's talk about this book. What was the inspiration? When did you decide, because you were not an author, you're a nurse and an educator. How did you decide, and when did you decide, and why did you decide to write the book?
Well, thank you, Tina. I wrote the book because I feel very passionate about helping people understand what happens when people are going through the end of life. I really honestly believe that if people are willing to talk about it, for one thing, learn about it, that I think they really have a better end-of-life experience, and so will their families. So the book is really geared towards families, not specifically healthcare people, and I think it gives people, through storytelling, a good idea of what are decisions that are common, what are experiences that are common emotionally and physically, and how does the hospice team, how does the healthcare system work when someone has a serious or end-of-life disease. So as I worked at various hospices, I've worked at several of the area hospices in Western Mass and brought students into a lot of the different hospices. I would typically tell the same story about the importance, for example, of advanced directives or healthcare proxy, having a MOLS form, or symptom management. I'd talk about Ray, who had lung cancer and COPD, and what his family went through, and some of the myths he had about medications, and how his family dealt with his end-of-life disease, how he dealt with it. So every story is based on somebody that I cared for and the lessons I learned from them. So each story shares the family interaction, the family background, and so forth, and then every story ends with reflections about the importance of privacy, dignity, symptom management, closure, life review, basically whatever the story was about. But as I was educating new nurses or new spiritual counselors or social workers coming into the program, I would typically make a point using a story, and so I decided to write up the stories. So I really started having versions of stories over the past 10 years, but really it's been the last 5 years that I really focused on the book and wrote up the stories and went through the process of finding an agent, finding a publisher, all of that.
So are the I assume this is broken into chapters.
Yes.
So is kind of give us the layout of the book. I mean, is it like each chapter is a story with whatever the example is that you're trying to illustrate of, okay, is that kind of how that's?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, so the first chapter is called, I I can't believe this is happening. And this is basically what so many people experience, that they've a phone call, a medical appointment, and you find out that you have end-of-life type disease. And so this is a story about Alice, a woman I cared for. And by the way, the names are changed and the scenarios are changed to hide, to conceal their privacy. So basically, it's a story about a woman that found out that she had pancreatic cancer, and then what she and her family went through during that particular situation. And then the second chapter is about Dottie, and that's basically she was referred to palliative care, and her initial reaction was, I'm not dying. And then it goes on to explain what palliative care is, how it worked, both in the hospital when she got a consult, and then when she was on a visiting nurse program that had a palliative care program aligned with it. And then the third chapter is really about my mom and our experience as a family. And the title of this chapter is called Good Days and Bad Days. Because most of the people that I know that are 80s, 90s, and in their hundreds have good days and bad days. And I think in terms of quality of life, I think it's important to try to maximize the good days, right? And minimize the bad days. And so this was a story, it also, my mom's chapter talks about, she called a family meeting at the age of 90 to let all of us know that she's decided that she wanted to sign a do not resuscitate. And it talked about her experience with my dad, who actually died in an intensive care unit, had been on a respirator. And she did not want it to go that way for her. So she wanted to have some control over the end-of-life choices that she had. So then the rest of the chapters, the middle ones, talk about some of the symptoms that people experience. For example, pain. And not everybody has a lot of symptoms at end of life, but many people do. And so symptom management is really a healthcare specialty, and people in hospice and palliative care are experts in symptom management. And so we talk about somebody that was, for example, Ray. He was discharged home with a VNA referral, and thankfully the person from the VNA sort of intercepted the referral and realized that he made it really clear he didn't want additional treatment. He made it really clear he wanted to go home and just be comfortable. So the referral was made to hospice. There's another chapter about Roger, who was sort of a mechanic, tough as nails, adored by his family, and basically had lots of misconceptions about medications and the use of morphine, the use of other medications, did not want anybody helping him with his personal care. And then there's chapters that talk about the difficulty breathing and anxiety and restlessness, which is very, very common. And also throat secretions, which often happens more later on in someone's end-of-life process. So that the end of it talks about some of the spiritual, social, family dimensions, and how sad it is to have somebody that's not going to be with you anymore on this earth. Yeah. So basically, it follows sort of a pattern around talking about some of the major parts about what families experience, but also I think it really gives a good picture about how hospice intercedes with families at the end of life.
I just want to, because you've used the word family a lot, and one of the things that I learned about hospice, and it was early in my career, and it was a completely new concept to me at the time. It doesn't sound so ridiculous now, but certainly in the 1970s and 80s it did. And that was that hospice defines family, however the patient defines family. So family could be your neighbor who's been, living next door and you've been best friends for 60 years.
Right.
Or, back in the day, it could be your life partner who may or may not be the same gender as you.
Right.
Again, but hospice goes with the flow of however you define family. I mean, I've worked with families, where the patient has said, I haven't had any contact with my son in 35 years. Well, the conversation then becomes, well, how do you feel about that now?
Right.
I mean, they may still feel really strongly. Just because I'm on my deathbed doesn't mean I want you contacting my son and, inviting him up here.
Right.
That's that's not a medical decision. That is it's a personal decision. And of course we want people to think through that process. But I think that's important to know.
I think that's very important to know. Everyone defines their family however they choose to. And I think that's one of the nice things about hospice care is I think hospice goes in and we basically help people through a very difficult family time. and not necessarily try to help, with long-standing family difficulties. But that being said, I have to say that I'm always inspired by families and the love and care they provide to each other.
Yeah.
I find it incredibly inspiring.
Yeah. All right, we're going to take a short break. If you're just joining me, my guest this morning is Maureen Groden. Maureen is a hospice nurse, educator, and author. The book is When a Loved One is Dying, Conversations About Care, Connections, and Coping. We will take a short break. We're going to listen to Dean Lewis singing How Do I Say Goodbye? We'll be back.
Morning, there's a message on my phone. It's my mother saying, darling, please come home. I fear the worst, but how could you leave us all behind? There's so much to say, but there's so little time. So how do I say goodbye to someone who's been with me for my whole damn life? You gave me my name and the color of your eyes. See your face when I look at mine. So how do I say goodbye when I couldn't? You always saw the best in me. Right or wrong, you were always on my side. But I'm scared of what life without you's like. And I saw the way she looked into your eyes. And I promise if you go, I will make sure she's alright. So how do I say goodbye to someone who's been with me for my whole damn life? You gave me my name and the color of your eyes. See your face when I look at mine. So how do I say goodbye? And there's no way you could ever let me down. Gonna steal some time and start again. You'll always be my closest friend. And someday we're gonna make it out. Just hold the light. Just hold the light high, high. So how do I say goodbye to someone who's been with me for my whole damn life? You gave me my name and the color of your eyes. I see your face when I look at mine. So how do I say goodbye? So how do I say goodbye?
Underwriting is brought to you in part by R. Levesque Associates. They are offering landscape architecture, civil engineering, environmental permitting, and land surveying. RLA is a second-generation company devoted to excellence in the planning and design of outdoor spaces. On the web at rlaland.com or at 40 School Street in Westfield.
Listen to me, Michael Buster McMahon, Mondays 8 to 10 a.m. to learn the stories behind your favorite songs. Or don't. I'm not the boss of you.
Community Radio.
107.5 FM WSFD. Live from Studio 120 at Westfield Technical Academy, this is WCPC Channel 15 and 107.5 FM WSFD-LP Westfield.
Good morning, Westfield. It is 7:48. You are indeed listening to WSFD 107.5 FM on your dial and watching Cable Channel 15 WCPC. My name is Tina Gorman. I am your Wake Up Wednesday host, and I'm in the studio this morning with Maureen Groden. Maureen is a hospice nurse, educator, and author. Her book just came out, When a Loved One is Dying, Conversations About Care, Connection, and Coping. And we have some miscellaneous things that, we were both kind of going through our notes saying, oh, we didn't talk about this, we didn't talk about that. But one of the things that I do want to mention while I'm thinking about it, Maureen, is where can people purchase this book? Where's your book available?
Yes, well, my book is available right now through my website. There are 4 links that are there.
Okay.
And it's www.maureengroden, Groden.com, and Groden is Groden, and there are links to Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Johns Hopkins University Press, who is the publisher, and also Bookshop.
Okay, perfect. Thank you for that. I want to say one thing before I turn it over to you for some of these other things, and that is that having worked at a skilled nursing facility when I was in Davenport, Iowa, that was my first experience with, with my director of nursing, who said we participate in hospice. So we would oftentimes get hospice patients that came in, and that was the last sort of placement. And one of the things that we found was, of course, by the time we saw these patients, they did not look at all like they looked 5 years ago, 10 years ago, for sure. It was really helpful, I found, and I was a social worker at that time, that was my position, of having the family bring in some photos of the person 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 5 years ago, because, we would see this patient that was, oftentimes in the final weeks of their life. Right. And they'd possibly been battling whatever they've been, battling for many months. And so that was our perspective, and that was our vision. But of course, the family's vision is grandpa and dad and my brother and my best friend, and, just a completely different perspective. And so in order, I think, for the staff to have a better understanding of what the family is going through, those pictures really helped. And it really helped us to see them as a person and not as an illness. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely.
A cancer patient in room 215, that kind of thing.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And I think, hospice is very humanistic in that way, in that we do encourage people to bring in photos. We also... I think that people are who they've always been, really.
Yes.
They really are who they've always been. And to the family, that's exactly who they are. Their grandparent, their friend. And I think that that's very important. And I think of it a lot when I take care of people that have dementia.
Yes.
You obviously don't want to use photographs to say, who's this, who's this?
No.
You have to allow people to be wherever they are. And that's another thing that's changed over the years.
Yes.
Instead of constantly reorienting somebody, allow them to be wherever they are, but certainly get a fuller picture of who they are through the photographs that might be in their room.
Yeah, absolutely. Mm-hmm. I remember when I was sharing with Maureen off air that my sister-in-law was in Fisher Home, which is hospice up in Hampshire, before she passed. And, the first thing they said was, bring everything in. And we did. I mean, we hung all kinds of things on the wall. But one of the things that we did was we brought our high school, we all went to high school together down in New Jersey, my husband, my sister-in-law, myself. And, my husband was kind of like, sometimes you get to that end of life and it's probably weeks, maybe days. What do you talk about or what do you do? Of course, the person is often sleeping a lot. But I said, take the high school yearbook up there. Gary said it was so wonderful. They just went through it. They looked at pictures. They talked about old friends and mutual friends and who dated who and all that. And my sister-in-law looked at my husband, and this was about a week before she passed away, and she said, "We had a lot of fun in high school, didn't we?" They were only a year apart. They were like Irish twins. They were like 10 months apart, whatever it was. And Gary said it's just now one of his best memories, of just so nice. Kind of going through that. And so, I think there's a lot to be said for how we approach this. And I often hear from families, and I've heard it for many years. It's like, well, what do we talk about, or what do we do? And with my grandfather, I watched, remember the old home movies that we used to take on the reels, this was before all the digital stuff. Well, before my grandfather died, we spent like an entire weekend. I flew out to visit him, and he was living with my parents at the time out in Cincinnati, and we just watched home movies, and it was hilarious because some of them, you knew what was like. My grandfather was going, oh, this is where Auntie Char's hat blows off, on Easter morning. It was windy and they were all parading down the porch steps and, just so many. And that is like one of my best memories of watching like nonstop for 2 days, just, 40 years worth of home videos. So
yeah, I think that's people don't always realize how special that time can be. Yeah. And when my mom was dying, same thing. My siblings would come and they'd go and we'd sit at the bedside, and maybe we'd tell stories, we'd pray, we'd tear up. But those are some of the most together times. And it's a very, very, challenging time. And people are often very tired, caregiving for hospice folks is around the clock. But it can be a wonderful time too. Some hospices, we had a harp player, we had a bedside singing group. Some people have faith leaders come out and give blessings. This can be a very important time that people look back on. Massage, right?
Music, pet. You mentioned pet before. Lots of
energy work, Reiki, and I think that this is a time that families look back on, and I think that these memories stay with people for the rest of their lives.
And I think the other thing, Maureen, to just remind people, because this is such a serious topic, it's okay to laugh with a person.
Right.
I mean, there were times where, like I know my dad had Alzheimer's, and I know at the end he was, pretty nonverbal and so forth, but we could, I would tell a story and he would just start laughing, and, it's okay. It is serious, but it doesn't all have to be tears.
Right.
There can be some, really happy memories as well. Maureen, one of the things that you and I had talked about off air before we actually even got into the interview was how long people are typically on hospice. And I have always felt like usually the answer is not long enough, because I think people oftentimes wait too long. I think there's probably a whole psychology to why that happens, but talk to us about length on hospice.
Yeah, it's definitely a problem. I think that most people wait too long to come on hospice, and they go through a lot leading up to that. And it's not an easy decision to make. You're basically foregoing more aggressive treatment for whatever your terminal illness is. But most of the research now is showing that people that sign on or get a palliative care consult earlier on have a better quality of life, less depression, and believe it or not, they actually live longer.
Yes.
Because people that are frail, people that have a serious illness, going into the hospital can be very burdensome from them. If you think about it, take someone that has congestive heart failure, for example. They go into the hospital, they get medically treated, hopefully better, but they get very weak and deconditioned, so they go to rehab, and then they get hopefully stronger, hopefully still medically stable, and then come back home and often get home care services. They never see their primary care person in that whole loop. And sometimes that loop happens 3 or 4 times a year. And it can be very, very difficult because people that are frail are at risk for infections, the flu, pneumonia, skin problems, falls. And so treatment can be burdensome for people who are frail. And a lot of people that say they want to have their end of life at home, unfortunately don't, because they are reacting to medical things as opposed to planning for medical things.
Yeah.
Most people that have a disease, there are triggers that you can become aware of. So right now, the median length of stay in hospice programs is only 18 days. That's the same as it was in 2010. And basically, it becomes sort of an emergency room situation. Hospice comes in, and it's get a bed, get oxygen, get this, get that, get medicines, get supplies, get people. And it becomes pretty stressful for families. And I think that the benefit is up to 6 months. Nobody is kicked off of hospice unless they get better. So those physicians have to decide that somebody's condition is basically getting worse, not better. And as people progress, they lose weight. They oftentimes move around less, eat less, sleep more. And if there are certain scenarios where people actually come onto hospice, it usually happens with someone who has dementia or a heart condition. They end up in the hospital. They seem to be pretty sick, but once they get back home, they start to eat their own food and be in their own surrounding, around people they love, and they get better. Those are the scenarios. About 14% of people are discharged from hospice, but they're also not kicked off when they get up to 6 months too. It's just that the medical directors have to really look closely at their picture to make sure they're still eligible. But most people wait too long to come on. It's very scary. It's a big decision. And yet people go through a lot that doesn't make them better sometimes. And those are the people that need really good advice from palliative care, consults, also hospice informationals. Most hospices will come out and just do an informational, educate people about it and what it would mean for them.
I think I want to finish up with the concept. I know you kind of put this in, and I used to talk about it when I was teaching, is hospice and hope.
Yes.
Is there no hope? Have we given up all hope? And how do we define hope? Hope for what?
Right. Well, that's a really good question. I think one of the myths about hospice has to do with it means giving up hope. So from what my experience is most people, hope isn't only about living longer.
Right.
And I think I had a spiritual counselor one time that explained it so well. She said, take someone with cancer. When you first suspect that you have something wrong and you might have a mass or something, you're hoping that it's not cancerous. You're hoping it's benign. And then maybe if you find out that it is, then you're hoping there's a cure for it. And then maybe when you find out that there might not be a cure for it, then you're hoping you're going to be comfortable. You're hoping you're going to have a peaceful death. You're hoping that your family is going to be okay. And so hope, we never dispel any, hope that people have. It's just that what people hope for changes.
Yep.
And so we always encourage a sense of hope, and we help people with whatever they're hoping for.
Right. And I think hope can be, we think of hope as being these big things, and I think it can be small, hope
Right.
for a good day, hope for, a little sunshine in my life, hope
Right.
for that I enjoy this little meal.
Right, right.
Just a hope for a visit from maybe somebody you haven't seen in a while, or even somebody that you see a lot.
Right.
Just hope that, my granddaughter's going to be in a good mood when we visit today or whatever. So
Yeah.
I think that's really important. We are out of time, unfortunately. We could talk about another 3 hours.
Right.
But my guest this morning has been Maureen Groden. Maureen is a hospice nurse, educator, and the author of the book, When a Loved One is Dying, Conversations About Care, Connection, and Coping. You can get, it is available at Barnes & Noble, at Johns Hopkins, who is the publisher. And you can get that information on Maureen's website, which is www.maureengroden, GRODEN.com. So all the links are in there. Maureen, thank you so much.
Thanks
and
for having me.
I hope that you will come back and join us and we can continue the conversation.
Yeah, I will. Thank you.
You are listening to WSFD 107.5 FM on your dial, and you are watching WCPC Cable Channel 15, and I believe Everything Southwick is up next. We'll be back.
Support for the community programming provided by